What you're about to see, from my point of view, is probably the most important information that I could give. You could know everything about the Merkaba and how to create the fields, and you could know the cities, you could know everything else on the creation of the Merkaba and how it works, but without making the connection with the higher self, you wouldn't have the wisdom that would be necessary to actually use the Merkaba. And so what I'm about to give is everything I now know, and this is always constantly growing. It's an organic structure that's happening. For a long time, when I taught this in the classes, and especially for any of you who've seen the old videos, and I gave a specific technique to connect with higher self. I gave this technique because it was the one that I used, or at least I thought that I had used, in the very beginning. But when I would watch the students that came to the class, I discovered that only maybe 50% or so of them were able to make the connection with higher self. And then there was this large group of people who, no matter how hard they tried or whatever they did or how long they struggled or how much they meditated, nothing would happen. And after doing this for a few years, I began to suspect that I was missing something. Back in May of 1993, I asked my higher self to give me the information that I was missing. I knew that I needed more, and would it please teach me so that I could teach others how to do this. It was no more than a month later, in June of 1993, at a workshop in, I think it was Olympia, Washington, that as I was signing up the people for this workshop, one man came through the door. He was perhaps in his 50s. And when I looked at him and I could see his aura, I could see no reason why this person was at my workshop. And so at one point I went up to him and I said, what are you doing at my workshop? You don't need to be here. And he says, I don't know. He says, I don't know why I'm here. I just think I'm supposed to be here. And so the workshop continued, and after 2 or 3 days, I went up to him again and started talking to him, and found out that he was a kahuna from Hawaii, and so I asked him, I said, well, what do you, he says he was a teacher, and I said, what do you teach? And he says, I specialize in one thing, and that's connecting with higher self. And so when it came time for me to teach about higher self, I put him up on the stage, and I sat down in the audience, figured he knew more about it than I did, which he did. And he talked for about an hour and a half, and I really learned a lot in what he had to say. Originally, the procedure or the method that I was teaching on how to reach the higher self, I would talk about how you would go into the spherical breathing, and then once you would attain that, you would then write down on a piece of paper a specific, asking for the higher self to give a very specific test so that you could prove you had made connection with higher self. And then you would go into the meditation, go very, very deeply, and ask for the higher self, invoke the higher self to come in, and then ask it for a test, something that you could literally do and go out and do that would demonstrate absolutely to you that you had made this connection, from which you could go from there on forth. And that worked with some people. But the reason that it didn't work with the others was now becoming clear. My understanding of it was that there was me, and then there was my higher self. I wasn't aware that I had a lower self. I wasn't aware of this. Now, according to the Huna knowledge that this kahuna was giving to me, there are these 3 levels of existence that human are connected with, and since we know that everything comes in 3s, I should have suspected it a long time ago. There is the higher self, there is us on this everyday level, and there is this lower self. And according to the kahuna, you cannot reach the higher self, at least they've never figured out how. You can't reach the higher self by going directly to the higher self. You first have to go, not up, but down. You have to go down to the lower self and connect with that. The lower self, according to the Huna knowledge, is the subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind, according to this kahuna, he was saying that it was like a child. It was about 2 to 4 years old. Though recently I connected with another kahuna who felt that it was more like 4 to 6 years old. So I don't know. It's somewhere in there. It's a child anyway. It's 2, 4, 6 years old. And this is the level of awareness that you're dealing with on the subconscious mind. And so what the kahuna says is that you must first connect with the subconscious mind, but in order to do that, you can't do it from your sophisticated adult world. You could go into meditation and meditate and become extremely serious about what you're doing, but the more that you do that, the less likely you're going to connect with higher self, with lower self. In order to connect with lower self, you must become childlike. And I don't mean being silly and giggling around and stuff like that. I mean that innocent place of a child when you look into their eyes and you see no ego and you see this innocent child. That part of that aspect of us is in every one of us, though it's been suppressed and pushed down. And we must, in one way or another, allow that part of us to come out to begin the process. Some of you perhaps have read this book by James Redfield, The Celestine Prophecy. This would be a good book if you want to read what I'm really talking about in making this particular connection. The child, when it finds itself in nature or in any situation, its attention level is focused directly and precisely on the here and the now and what is being presented directly to them. And it is this attention and this innocence that we have to begin to cultivate inside of ourselves. And so when James Redfield talks about going out and connecting with the trees, which was the way the Druids used to do this, the trees are very powerful spirits. And in that connection through life, through the nature of the reality, and through this particular innocence, this childlike innocence, this is the doorway, this magical doorway through something can begin to happen that if you have never experienced it or you don't know what it is, it's very, very hard to believe until you can actually do it and see what it is. This is what happened to me, and I didn't know that it was happening to me. I went to Vietnam. I was over in this war over there. I got very discouraged over humanity. And I came back and I thought, well, okay, I'm going to find God. And I decided I was going to do it by becoming a physicist. And so I went into the University of California and studied physics and mathematics and all this stuff, looking for God. And got very discouraged in all of that way also. And I did this during the late 60s. And imagine being in Berkeley, California in the 60s when there was machine guns on the corners and tanks everywhere and macing people. And I really got discouraged. The whole war that was in Vietnam was carried over. And what I did was and especially in 1970 when I graduated, was the time of Kent State, when all this, if some of you may not remember, but the colleges of the United States closed down. And I just said, this is it. That's the last straw. And I came here to Canada. And I came not very far away from here, actually. And I found peace and I found beauty. And I found a home out in the middle of nowhere in the mountains. And I decided to do what I always wanted to do. And that was to go live in the woods with no money or anything at all, and just live off the land. So I always wanted to do that, and I did it. And I mean, I really did it. I lived on I had no money, and it didn't even matter, because I'd learned how to live really, really easily. But in doing that, all my fantasies began to come out. You know, and I used to go out and begin to talk to the trees and the lakes and the water, and I began to see that everything was alive and conscious. And the more that I lived out my fantasies, and the more that I did exactly what I always wanted to do, not doing what someone else wanted me to do, but what I really wanted to do, the happier I got, the more excited I got about life. I'd wake up in the morning and I'd be so excited I could hardly stand it that another day on planet Earth was here, and I was ecstatic all the time. It was in pure joy. And it just kept getting better and better and better. I got to the place where animals would come right up to me. I could walk right up to deer, right up to them, and look at them right in the face, and they'd look right back at me, and they wouldn't even be afraid. And because I didn't have anything in me that was challenging them or causing fear. And I could walk right past bears, and they would just sort of look at me, and there was no anything. My wife actually would, I remember one time, walked right up to a bear that was eating a deer, which is like the most craziest thing you could do by normal ways of thinking, because they'll just kill you. And she walked up to him and sat right down with him and watched him eat this. And the bear didn't even just looked at her and just kept right on going. And even now, when we were out one place, she'd just walk up and pick up a rattlesnake and look at it and put it down with no problem, because there was nothing going on. Well, it was in this kind of state that I reached unconsciously that I began to connect with my lower self, with the subconscious mind. And what I now know is the subconscious mind, my subconscious mind, is linked directly to the subconscious mind of the planet and to all nature, everywhere. And so, really, when you're really talking about the subconscious mind, you're talking about the consciousness of the planet, the whole being of the planet. First, the coincidences begin to happen. I would think something and it would just happen. I would wish I would see a friend and he would just walk out of the woods. Just one thing after another, after another, after another. And the coincidences began to fall so fast and so quick that I began to suspect that something was really going on with me. I didn't know what it was, but I did notice that this was happening way too often to just be pure coincidence. And then one day, when we had decided to study meditation, one day we were sitting there and we were meditating, and poof, these two big angels appear in the room. And they were both about 10 feet tall, and one was purple and one was green, translucent. You could see through them, and they were identical, and they were incredibly beautiful. And the love that was coming from them was just incredible. And I didn't know what it was. The first thing they said to us was, "We are you," on another level, another time. I didn't know what they meant. And I just started, it was so beautiful, and my wife and I both connected with this at the same time. It was so beautiful that we just started following this. And soon after that, the miracles began to happen. Things began to happen that just can't happen, but they did happen. And first one, and then two, and then things started happening every day of my life. For 2 or 3 years there, I watched things happen that just simply can't happen. But it was so much fun, I didn't care. I let go, I didn't care anymore. I mean, I cared, I really cared, but I didn't care about the old way of thinking. And, it didn't matter to me what anyone thought. This felt right. And I kept going in this direction. And one of the things they